Out of fuel and with no runway in sight, this plane is going down in the water.
Definitely underwater, and the aircraft was rolling to the left.
There were bodies, there were people on the floor in the galley.
A routine flight out of New York slams down into the Hudson River.
At this point, I'm thinking this can't be happening to me.
A hijacked 767 is forced into the ocean. It's the most dramatic ditching ever caught on camera.
The plane was like tumbling or something. I said, that's it, I'm dead.
These are life and death ordeals told by the pilots and passengers.
The captain just said, brace for impact.
Dramatic animations put you right at the terrifying scenes. And an in-depth investigation reveals why some pilots made the risky decision to put their planes down in the water, and how they lived to tell the tale. When U.S. Airways Flight 1549 went down in the Hudson River, surveillance cameras were only able to capture these remote images of the landing. It's hard to see what really happened. Now, this detailed animation shows the dramatic landing dubbed the Miracle on the Hudson as you've never seen it before. In the aviation industry, it's known as ditching. Putting a plane down in the water due to an emergency. It's what happens when the nearest open space is not a runway, not even a stretch of open field or a highway, but a body of water. In the case of U.S. Airways Flight 1549, the Hudson River in New York City. Just 6 minutes before the splashdown, Flight 1549 is cleared for taxi and takeoff at New York's LaGuardia Airport. First Officer Jeffrey Skiles is at the controls. Though he's flown for more than 30 years, he's new to the Airbus. For the past 8 years, he's flown a Boeing 737.
Well, the takeoff was uneventful. It was a nice day, it was cold. And this was only my second trip on the airplane, so I was actually hand flying the airplane to get used to it. And about 3,000 feet, we, flew into the birds.
The plane's been in the air for about 90 seconds when it collides with a flock of Canada geese, crippling both engines.
This is Cactus 1539. Hit birds to lost thrust on both engines, returning back towards LaGuardia.
Okay, you need to return to LaGuardia. Turn left heading up 220. Sorry, stop your departures. Got emergency returning.
Following protocol, Captain Chesley Sullenberger takes control of the airplane from his co-pilot with 2 simple words, my aircraft. Remarkably, there is footage of the plane's last moments airborne.
Sully took over control of the airplane and called for the dual engine failure checklist that we do, and I started to perform that.
Trying to get the engines restarted?
Yes.
Was there any luck at all?
No. The engines have to be in a certain start envelope, we call it, to start, and that usually is predicated on you going a lot faster.
The Airbus dual-engine failure checklist assumes the engines have failed at cruising altitude. 30,000 feet would typically give pilots ample time to figure things out. Hitting a flock of Canada geese at just 3,000 feet is another story.
What at this point is going through your mind?
Well, at this point, I'm thinking this can't be happening to me.
Even though Flight 1549's engines were no longer producing thrust, the plane didn't simply fall from the sky out of control. A plane with engine failure can still be controlled as it comes down. To keep the plane flying, the pilot pitches it nose down to maintain lift over the wings, essentially trading altitude for airspeed. The plane then gains momentum, much like a roller coaster going downhill. In the process, the pilot has to make a mental judgment as to how far the plane will travel.
At 3,000 feet, you're probably only going to travel a few miles. At 40,000 feet, you're going to be able to travel 100 miles, roughly.
Michelle Summers Halloran spent 15 years as a commercial pilot. She's now an associate professor at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Florida.
So now you've got to figure out, based on how long you know this plane will stay in the sky, as to what you can reach.
That is absolutely correct.
So you're doing some very basic math.
You're doing a lot of mental math in public, yes.
Captain Sullenberger has nearly 20,000 hours of flight time under his belt, so it doesn't take long for him to realize that at their altitude and rate of descent, it's too risky to try to glide all the way to an airport in such a densely populated area. It's now 3:28 p.m. Flight 1549 has less than 2 minutes until impact. Air traffic controllers, at times using the wrong flight number, try and guide the plane to an airport.
Package 1529. We can get it to you. Do you want to try to land 1013?
We're unable. We may end up in Hudson.
Hi, Package 1549. It's going to be left traffic to runway 31.
Unable.
Just north of the George Washington Bridge, the captain aligns his Airbus A320 with the Hudson River. He passes the bridge just to the east and continues towards the southwest.
I looked out the window, saw we were actually below the rooftops of Manhattan. I said, this is not a good sign. We're not making Newark.
Did Sully look at you and say we're going in the water, or did you both come to the realization that's where this was going?
I think it was just the only option we had. There was no, we weren't going to make it to an airport, and that was the only open spot that we saw.
If a pilot is forced to ditch, the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration has recommendations for doing so. It all comes down to wind and waves, or swells.
In a perfect world, how would you land on the waves?
Depending on the wind and water, I would always want to land parallel to the swells. So if your waves are coming this way, you want to land on the top. You never ever want to be able into, and this is what's called a cross swell, where you're perpendicular into the water this way.
What might happen?
If you land into the face of the swell, you could actually flip over like this. That's not a good thing.
Another potential hazard that could have spelled disaster for Flight 1549 would have been to come down with one wing higher than the other.
The airplane could have cartwheeled, and that would have been very violent and significantly lessened the opportunity to get everybody out as well as they did.
Package 1529, turn right 280. You can land runway 1 at Teterboro.
We can't do it.
Okay, which runway would you like at Teterboro?
We're going to be in Hudson.
The captain just said, brace for impact. Help. And everyone started saying prayers, just kind of looking at each other, not knowing what to say, what to do.
At 3:30 p.m., with wing flaps and slats extended to help slow the plane down, Flight 1549 is about to splash down in the Hudson River.
As you watch this unfold, everything's just about right. It's slow, the nose is up, wings are level, and they've got the good fortune of it being fairly calm.
We didn't know if we were hitting water, if we were hitting land, which was what we were better off. And then, you know, the impact hitting the water was just, you know, the most tremendous impact you could imagine.
All 155 people on board survive. From bird strike to touchdown, the entire incident lasts just 3.5 minutes. Not enough time to get through the dual engine failure checklist, much less a ditching checklist. And not enough time to enable the ditch switch, a valve that effectively seals the plane and allows it to float for longer.
You're not sinking, you're alive. Was there an exhilaration, or was there still an adrenaline going on?
I'm sure there was an adrenaline rush, I guess. We went to hospital, and 4 hours later, my blood pressure was, I think, 160 over 100, which is, you know, I'm normally a 120 over 70 guy. So obviously there was something going on physiologically that I didn't understand at the time.
I am terrific. This is the best day ever.
A lot of things went our way.
What kind of things went your way?
Apparently there are swells a lot on the Hudson. It was completely flat that day. And we happened to land right where the ferries go from New Jersey to Manhattan, so that they were right there. They were able to come and rescue us. Other than hitting the birds, everything went our way that day.
Next, what really happens when birds fly into a jet engine? The startling damage even a small bird can do to a 70-ton jet. And Flight 1549 is not the first commercial jet to be put down in the water. There have been others, some just as successful, others, tragically, not. In the wake of the ditching of U.S. Airways Flight 1549, many people wondered how a flock of birds could incapacitate a 70-ton jet. As large and powerful as jet engines are, they can also be surprisingly delicate. This video was shot during a bird strike test run by aircraft engine manufacturer Pratt & Whitney. The birds are dead before the test begins. The carcasses are shredded as they collide with a turbofan engine, but the engine doesn't fare much better, with permanent damage to its hollow titanium fan blades.
When a large bird goes in, it damages the compressor in the front of the airplane, and those blades that break, they just cascade through the rest of the engine.
Ladies and gentlemen, the bang you heard was not our original problem. There was a large eagle on the runway.
Bird strikes are more common than you might think. According to the U.S. Federal Aviation Authority, there are at least 20 wildlife strikes a day across the U.S. The problem costs the aviation industry an estimated $2 billion a year. And since 1988, wildlife strikes have resulted in more than 200 deaths around the world. Fortunately, there were no human fatalities as a result of the bird strike that forced Flight 1549 into the water. But not all ditchings go so smoothly. A pilot ends up over the Caribbean Sea, out of fuel, out of options, and soon into the ocean. That's the tragic story of ALM Flight 980. What went so wrong? 2nd of May, 1970. In a partnership between two now defunct charter airlines, Dutch carrier ALM and American carrier Overseas National Airlines, ALM Flight 980 is set to leave New York's JFK Airport at 11 a.m. 57 passengers and 6 crew members are on board.
It was a beautiful spring day. Temperatures were in the 60s, scattered clouds, light winds. It was a beautiful day in New York.
Flight 980's destination is the Caribbean, Juliana Airport in St. Martin. Landing here presents unusual challenges, as this video shows. The runway is perilously close to a beach. People can practically reach out and touch jets as they're coming down just a few feet over their heads.
If the airplane were to land short and end up on that beach full of people, it would be catastrophic. To be that close to that large an airplane, moving that quickly, I guess the word awesome comes to mind.
There's also a mountain range off to the east. And if all of that isn't enough, there's the unpredictable Caribbean weather. All those factors combined are about to turn a routine flight into a nightmare. For the first time after 4 decades, the pilot of that flight, Captain Ballsy DeWitt, tells his dramatic story.
As far as an accident being a chain of events, this definitely was it.
Captain DeWitt says he confirmed he had enough fuel to make it not just to his destination, but also to an alternative airport in case of diversion, standard for all commercial flights. On the ground, he goes through his equipment checklist and discovers the cockpit's PA system isn't working. He's still permitted to fly without it. At 11:14 a.m., the flight is cleared for takeoff. The DC-9 is designed for short, frequent flights. At nearly 1,700 miles, the route from New York to St. Martin will stretch this aircraft to its limit. As the flight heads south, the weather begins to deteriorate. Captain DeWitt is told visibility at the St. Martin airport is below the minimum standard required for landing. He elects to divert to nearby San Juan in Puerto Rico. But a few minutes later, San Juan Air Traffic Control Center tells him St. Martin Tower wants to talk to him.
So I picked up and I tried to get a hold of San Martin. I got a hold of San Martin Tower, and all they did was start giving me fairly good weather, 1,500 broken, etc., which was well above the minimums I needed. I did question him, where did the report come from that you were below minimums? I elected then to refile for San Martin, my original destination.
Out of fuel and with no runway in sight, this plane is going down in the water.
Definitely underwater, and the aircraft was rolling to the left.
There were bodies, there were people on the floor in the galley.
A routine flight out of New York slams down into the Hudson River. Tell the tale.
The captain just said, brace for impact.
Dramatic animations put you right at the terrifying scenes. And an in-depth investigation reveals why some pilots made the risky decision to put their planes down in the water, and how they lived to...
At this point, I'm thinking this can't be happening to me.
A hijacked 767 is forced into the ocean. It's the most dramatic ditching ever caught on camera.
The plane was like tumbling or something. I said, that's it, I'm dead.
These are life and death ordeals told by the pilots and passengers. When U.S. Airways Flight 1549 went down in the Hudson River, surveillance cameras were only able to capture these remote images of the landing. It's hard